Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Monday morning, November 14th. Well, the overall weather pattern has changed quite a bit for the eastern part of the nation. With the departure of Tropical Storm Nicole over the upcoming weekend, there have been some changes in the upper part of the atmosphere in terms of the wind flow. That has now opened the door for some cold air masses to move all the way into the central and eastern U.S. from northwestern Canada. In previous weeks, much of that cold air has been bottled up across western U.S., western Canada, and the first 12 or 13 days of November were quite warm indeed across much of the eastern U.S., but it looks like a cold weather pattern all this week, right through the weekend, and right into next week is almost a certainty. And let's get into some of the reasons why by first looking at the 500 millibar height anomaly forecast maps from last night's run of the 0Z GFS. This is the area I want to focus in on right here, this ridge across the far northwestern part of Canada. This is Alaska right on the map, right in this region right here. This is as we begin the day here on Monday. And watch what happens to that ridging over the northwestern part of Alaska. It just intensifies significantly by the middle of the week. These are way above normal heights for this particular part of North America, Alaska, far western part of Canada, along the west coast of Canada into the U.S., and it just sits there, and you can tell what happens here by the as far as the wind flow is concerned with these lines right here. This basically is telling you the flow of air will be like that. From way up there across the polar region down into Canada, and then spills out over into the central U.S., and ultimately it comes into the eastern U.S. and a lot of upper level troughiness over the eastern half of the nation. So this is definitely a cold weather pattern with high pressure ridging focused in on Alaska, western Canada. It allows for some what we call cross-polar air, with air coming from even across the pole from the other side of the pole into this side of the North Pole, down across Canada and into the central and eastern U.S. Again, this is that change in the upper air wind flow that we've been talking about that will kind of be set off by that last gasp of the Atlantic Basin tropical season. We were talking about that for the last couple of weeks, where we could have a tropical storm along the U.S. East Coast at the same time Arctic air was pouring into the northern plains. And indeed, on Friday there was a tropical storm impacting Florida with rain and wind. At the same time, a blizzard was raging over the northern plains. Places like Bismarck, North Dakota, ended up with 2 feet of snow. And once that tropical system departed, moved out over the open waters of the Atlantic, it kind of opened the door for the cold air to move into the eastern U.S., where it had been very warm for the first part of November, and it looks like it'll stay cold for quite a significant period here, certainly into next week and perhaps even beyond that. But look at that high pressure ridging over Alaska. Let's go a little bit farther in time. This is the Thursday morning forecast map, and again it kind of sticks around here all the way into the upcoming weekend. Here we are now by Saturday morning, still high pressure ridging over Alaska, western Canada, and upper level trough situated over the central and eastern U.S. A cold weather pattern for much of the weekend. There's a little bit of a wave here that we'll have to watch during the upcoming weekend. We have an initial system to deal with in the eastern U.S. later tomorrow night into early Wednesday that will produce snow for the interior higher elevation locations such as central, northeastern Pennsylvania, eastern West Virginia, all the way up into the interior sections of New England, and a cold rain for the immediate I-95 corridor region and down to the coast. And then over the weekend we'll have to watch. There are signs of a wave that will push into the southwestern U.S. and ultimately end up over the Gulf of Mexico. Whether it could push to the north and east, still too early to say, but you can kind of see a sign of it right here on this 500 millibar height anomaly forecast map for Saturday morning. Well, how does that height anomaly forecast map for the next several days translate to temperatures? Well, let's take a look at the 850 millibar temperature anomalies. This is as we begin the day here on Monday morning from last night's 0Z run of the GFS. And the first thing to notice is how extensive this colder than normal air is right now. It's quite impressive. It goes from coast to coast. This is all below normal air, at least at the 850 millibar level, and in most of these cases down to the surface as well. This is kind of unusual to see coast to coast below normal temperatures here. And where that ridge is popping up, western Canada and eastern part of Alaska, there's above normal temperatures here. Of course, above normal this time of the year still can produce snow in places like Alaska. But let's move forward here. We'll just see how persistent this cold air is with that ridge sitting and intensifying over northwestern Canada and Alaska. Here we are by the middle of the week, above normal temperatures over Alaska, but still not only colder than normal, but even more cold compared to normal by the middle of the week here in the middle part of the nation. And that just continues right through the end of the week. Here we are, and by Friday morning, a very, very extensive area of way below normal temperatures by the end of the week. We'll be very impressively cold here later in the week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday time frame. May struggle, for example, to reach 40 degrees, places like Philadelphia on Friday and maybe Saturday as well. The normal high right now in Philly, mid-50s. A very impressive cold. Meanwhile, with that ridge at 500 millibars intensifying over Alaska, that's where the above normal temperatures will reside at the end of the week. Let's move into the upcoming weekend, and here we are all the way into Saturday, much the same with virtually coast to coast below normal temperatures as we begin the upcoming weekend. Let's kind of focus in now on the CONUS, the continental U.S., and we're looking at vorticity maxima in the upper part of the atmosphere, the mid and upper level of the atmosphere. Vorticity represent areas of spin in the atmosphere that can lead to upward motion down at the surface level, and that's where we look for the potential of low pressure areas and basically precipitation. Here we are beginning the week here on Monday morning, a pretty impressive wave over New Mexico as we begin the day, and that moves to the north and east and holds together here by tomorrow morning. And this is the vorticity max right here that will set off the development of a low pressure along the mid-Atlantic coastline late tomorrow night, and that will produce a soaking rain event for places like D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, and from the immediate I-95 corridor region to the coast. And again, it can be cold enough for snow interior higher elevation locations such as eastern West Virginia, far western Virginia, central and northeastern Pennsylvania. The Pocono Mountains, for example, can get some accumulating of snow, and certainly interior sections of New York State and New England will get some accumulating snow. Now let's move ahead here at the vorticity field. Here we are by the time we get into midweek, and that system will start to pull away at midweek from the northeastern part of the nation. But then watch this area right here. Again, this is another wave we'll have to keep our eyes on. It could stay to the south and never push to the north and east over the upcoming weekend, but it's something we'll have to monitor here. Meanwhile, the northern branch continues to pump in colder than normal air from Canada into the eastern part of the U.S. again with that upper level flow, specifically that strong ridge over Alaska. The cold air can make its way from northwestern Canada all the way into the central and eastern U.S., contrary to what was happening during the first 11 or 12 days of November. Then we go into the upcoming weekend, and again, there will be a wave down here across the Gulf of Mexico region by the time we get into the upcoming weekend. We'll have to continue to monitor this. GFS keeps it suppressed on this particular run, so it does not have a chance to make its way to the north and east, and that could end up being the solution here. However, it's something we'll have to monitor over the next several days. Well, let's now wrap up with the surface forecast maps from last night's 0Z run of the GFS. Again, cold air now entrenched in the mid-Atlantic region, in the northeast U.S. Today will in fact be the coldest day of the season so far. Places like Philly, New York City, D.C. holding in the 40s well below normal, and certainly the coldest temperatures of the season so far. Last night lows were generally the low to middle 30s, many of the suburban areas along the I-95 corridor region. It'll be even colder tonight. The winds will die compared to last night, and the clouds will clear compared to last night. So tonight expect many suburban locations of the big cities in the I-95 corridor region to drop into the 20s, coldest night of the season so far coming overnight tonight. Now let's move forward here, and we have a pretty significant coastal low that will form here by late tomorrow right here, and it can actually produce maybe 3/4 of an inch to an inch and a quarter. Places like DC, Philadelphia, New York City, a soaking rainfall, and again, the blues represent some snow that will fall in the interior, higher elevation locations, West Virginia, central Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania, and certainly upstate New York, interior New England, all the way up to northern New England, the first accumulating snows of the season. Here is that intensifying low pressure area by the time we get to midday Wednesday off the New England coastline at this particular time. Following it, a reinforcing shot of cold air moves in, and again, even colder relative to normal across the middle part of the nation, extending into the east during the second half of the work week, and then we get into the upcoming weekend. And this is the area we'll watch. Right now, the GFS keeps this suppressed to the south, does not have a chance to make it all the way up to the northeastern part of the nation, but it's something several days away, and we'll continue to monitor it over the next few days here. So a pattern has set up for the central and eastern U.S., and it certainly will stick around all week into next week. We have a coastal low later tomorrow night that will produce a cold soaking rain for the immediate I-95 corridor region all the way to the coastline later tomorrow night, and interior snows in those higher elevation locations of the interior mid-Atlantic, the interior part of the northeast U.S. again later tomorrow all the way into early on Wednesday. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.